Welcome. I am Dr. Kaye Whitehead, and this is Today with Dr. Kaye. It's a daily talk show where we discuss everything from politics to prose, parenting to peace studies, education to evangelicals, and Taiwan to Trump. If it is important, if it is interesting, if it is happening in your community or around the country, and if it has your ear, then it has our attention. In our second hour, we speak with Director of Policy and Strategic Partnerships with the Job Opportunities Task Force. Karen York is here, and she's going to be for our feature segment, Advice Column. How do you get a job? And actually, how do you keep one? We'll answer any practical questions you might have about that. And then it's time to honor a trendsetter. It's Monday. So we're going to speak with writer and editor-at-large Dee Watkins. So make sure you call in with your questions for our hometown hero. But first, today is Indigenous Peoples Day, formerly known to some people as Columbus Day, which is arguably the most divisive of all federal holidays. Although Columbus is credited for leading the charge of European immigration to North America, history and research has shown us that Christopher Columbus was not a historic, heroic figure. He is a man who brought disease and wars to what would eventually become the United States. He brutalized thousands of Native Americans in the process. But if you read the president's statement, you wouldn't even know it. Published Friday on the official White House website, the statement celebrates Christopher Columbus for setting the stage for the development of our great nation and inspiring countless others to pursue their dreams and convictions, even in the face of extreme doubt and tremendous adversity. Donald Trump went so far as to talk about Columbus's Italian heritage and praise the manifold contributions of Italian Americans, including Columbus's own contribution, that critical first link, an enduring bond between the United States and America, and the United States and Europe. Let's be clear, folks. It became a federal holiday in 1937. There was a lot of lobbying by the Knights of Columbus, a Catholic fraternal organization, and other prominent Italian Americans. But my question to you is, when do we openly acknowledge from the top down the real impact of Christopher Columbus and other European explorers and colonists on indigenous populations? Now, previous U.S. presidents have acknowledged it. Barack Obama talked about the previously unseen disease, devastation, and violence. Bill Clinton talked about the partnership between Native Americans and Europeans, but George W. Bush, much like Trump, chose to focus only on European ties instead of Native American ones. That is about ignorance and bounding in this country. The last several years have seen widespread adoption of Indigenous Peoples Day. It's going to be celebrated this year by 4 American states and 53 American cities in lieu of Columbus Day. There are folks here in this country who are not celebrating Christopher Columbus. In August this past summer, Los Angeles was the largest city to declare Columbus Day as now Indigenous People Day. Seattle, Minneapolis, Berkeley have already made the change. This practice of throwing out Columbus Day and celebrating instead the people that he brutalized, it has created a controversy. There are folks in the Italian community who feel disrespected as they believe that this first step eliminates their festival of ethnic pride. We are now moving to a point where we have to really consider what's happening here in Baltimore City. Last year, the City Council considered a bill that would change the name of Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day within the city limits. It was introduced by City Councilman Brandon Scott after students at City Neighbors High School suggested it. It didn't pass, but the work is not finished. In the age where we are getting rid of Confederate statues, as we should, thinking deeply about our national anthem, as we should, showing less and less tolerance for racism and white supremacy, as we should, it is probably time to think about the message that is being sent and received when we continue to celebrate a man who brutalized and terrorized Indigenous people. Who celebrates the wicked? Perhaps in America, we should be the first ones to stop doing it. So, folks, my question to you, is it time to get rid of Columbus Day? Should we look to call it Indigenous Peoples Day? Should we look to do a real serious celebration of the people that were brutalized, the people that were terrorized? I think it's interesting here in this country that we tend to honor and celebrate the oddest people. We honor and celebrate Christopher Columbus, And we've talked about what he left in his wake: diseases, wars, destruction. I mean, the man got lost. Let's be very clear. Donald Trump called him a skillful navigator. He got lost en route to where he was going. We have Confederate statues up in places where Black folks walk and live, where we're celebrating people who were willing to die rather than allow Black folks to be free in this country. When do we get to a point where we say enough is enough? We're saying it's time to bury the old yesteryear and do something new. We say it's not okay for white supremacists to continue to march in Charlottesville. We say it's not okay for people to continue to be marginalized in this country just for the color of their skin. We say it's not okay to have Columbus Day and say we're going to celebrate a man despite what he has done. I'm thinking 100 years into the future, they might have a Donald Trump Day. And I'm hoping that somebody's on WEAA who's going to put the word out that perhaps we should not have a day celebrating a man who has some questionable intents. We stand true here at WEAA to being the voice of the community. We want to hear from you. I'm opening up the phone lines at 410-319-8888. We're going to talk about this. Should we finally get rid of Christopher Columbus Day? I also have Facebook Live going on. I see Tyra Hart. She said, oh my God, please no to the idea that we might have a Donald Trump Day 100 years into the future. I see people saying, like Kia's already told me to dump Trump. I am agreeing with you. I'm talking about in the future. Just like we're celebrating Christopher Columbus, we may have a Donald Trump Day. Joining me here to talk about this topic and more is Ryan Dorsey.
Hello, Dr. Kaye.
Hello, Ryan. I will say, because I have to be completely transparent with folks.
Dr. Kaye is my city council representative.
Yes, Ryan Dorsey is my city council representative. I live in the 3rd District. And Ryan Dorsey, who I talked about when I was going up for commissioner, and they asked me, well, why do you want to be a commissioner? What do you want to do? I said, I want to do the Ryan Dorsey effect. I want to knock on every door and let people know that you have someone out here fighting for you.
I can only pray to have the Dr. Kaye Whitehead effect one day.
I like you, Ryan. I'm so happy you're here. Now, I brought you in here, not just because I like you, because I do, but I brought you in here because you were doing a survey talking about those vandalized statues. Can you talk about that a bit and how it ties into Indigenous Peoples Day?
Yes, of course. Thank you for having me. So it's not really about multiple vandalized statues. It's about one in particular that exists in my district on Harford Road. Hello, I see I'm on the live stream there. In my district, on Harford Road and Hines Park, part of Herring Run Park. It's not original to that location. It was relocated there in 1963 from its original location at North Avenue and Harford Road, where it was erected by the French consul to the United States. And part of the history that's interesting is that part of the reason why we have other Columbus monuments in the city is that because this was erected by a French person, the Italian community actually rejected it and didn't believe it to be really something they had ownership over. And so they erected other monuments because they wanted something they could really call their own. It was only later that they came to really defend this and in recognition of it being the oldest Columbus monument in the country. I'll say also that the bill last year was, I just wanted to correct a thing I heard you say just before I came on. It was actually City Neighbors Charter School, not even high school students.
The charter school.
Yeah.
That's the one in our community, right?
That's the one over on the east side of Bel Air Road in Brandon Scott's district.
Okay.
So we're talking about even younger people than high school age.
Is that like a middle school?
Yeah.
Okay.
Elementary, middle.
Okay.
Even younger than high school, recognizing this shortcoming in our perspective on who we memorialize. And actually, in about a week, City Neighbors Charter, high school, the actual high school students are going to be having an expo called Who Deserves a Monument? And really asking this question that as I think we go one step further in my survey about the Columbus obelisk that you can find on my Twitter. It's the pinned tweet at the top of there, at Elect Ryan Dorsey. You can find a link, and anybody can participate in this survey, because one of the questions that we ask is, why do you see yourself as a stakeholder? And this is kind of the thing that I have put onto City Neighbors High School is let's go one step further and not just ask who deserves a monument, but who deserves a voice in deciding who gets a monument. Whose voice matters in determining what and who and how we memorialize whatever.
Now, do you find with the survey that you're doing, are people, first of all, are they even interested in terms of saying, let's rename them, let's put up something new? Do people care? And then second, are you finding that people are leaning one way or the other?
It's interesting that there seems to be a little bit more hype than there is actual interest. We're actually not getting that many responses to the survey, but we would like them. So anybody out there, please go ahead and fill that out. But the responses tend to favor looking forward and reflecting on how we view history rather than just restore it to Columbus. As I said in the Sun article that came out over the weekend, those that are really hell-bent on it being restored to Columbus tend to have a kind of preoccupation with kind of law and order politics, which is, real code language. And just saying, the vandals that did this need to be found. And that's kind of the first voice that I hear from those wanting to see it restored to Columbus. And then, of course, there is an Italian community that is not necessarily from Baltimore City. Of course, we do have a strong Baltimore City Italian community, but the one that is extremely activated in this tend to just be very great proponents of Columbus as a kind of a patriarch. And I have an interesting standing, I feel like, because my grandfather was the son of Italian immigrants. They had new Italian immigrants coming through his home throughout his entire life, his childhood in Hazleton, Pennsylvania. And he learned to play violin from one of those immigrants, and that set him on a career path that ultimately had him playing for Kennedy in the White House.
Right.
And
so for part of this, you understand perhaps where some people in the Italian American community are coming from. I mean, they feel like this particular move to change the name is an actual mark against them and not against Columbus. Like, how do we turn that narrative?
I think that we really have to implore folks to not stop by saying, one of the things I've heard from one of the leaders from the Italian community is that it's kind of ridiculous to view this 15th century man from a 21st century lens. But to implore folks to have a greater depth of perspective than that, because that's really what this is about. I mean, look, in my case, we're talking about one of 3 monuments in the city. Where there is not one to W.E.B. Du Bois.
Right. There's a number of African Americans.
City, right?
Right.
And also kind of have a greater depth of perspective on where the holiday comes from as a federal holiday. I heard you mention before I came in the work of the Knights of Columbus. One of the parts of the history of this holiday that I think most people don't recognize is how that voice became empowered in the first place.
Right.
There was a man named Generoso Pope in New York who first made money with Pope Foods, I think it was called, as a food distributor, and then he started buying and establishing Italian language newspapers. And through his control of media, became a powerful voice in New York City politics, being able to galvanize the big Italian community there. And he was instrumental in establishing the vote for FDR. And that won him the president's ear after. And he was also very involved in the Sons of Italy. It was this man who was really instrumental in convincing FDR to establish this as a national holiday. It was also this same man just a few months earlier than that who convinced FDR to turn a blind eye and take a neutral view to Italy's invasion of Ethiopia.
So it is all connected.
So the genocide of one Italian explorer hundreds of years before is recapitulating in Italian invasion of a black people's nation hundreds of years later, and the U.S. turning a blind eye to it.
And this is very interesting because it's amazing to me how people who don't know their history can simply follow along and celebrate these holidays, walk past these statues, lift them up without being clear about what they represent. I mean, we've said on the show that it's time for people to learn their history, to study their history, to know their history, because if you don't, then from the example you just gave us, there's a chance you might repeat it. We can still be talking about these statues 5, 10, 15 years into the future here.
I mean, this is a particularly, and when we use that particular example too, this man was a stated enemy of anti-fascism, and we are right now in 2017 standing off against fascism in this country.
It just keeps replicating, keeps repeating, keeps coming back until we stop it, right? Like, I think with the work that you're doing with my district, this notion that if we want something to change, we have to be the ones to change it. We're not waiting for anyone to come along and save us. We have to be willing to save ourselves.
That's what I'm about.
That's what I believe in. Well, I just want to thank you so much, Councilman Ryan Dorsey from the 3rd District, my councilman, by the way.
My councilman, Dr. Kaye.
So stay with us. When we come back, we're going to talk about that racist Dove ad. Are black women being too sensitive with these ads that depict us as dirty and undesirable and wanting to be white? Keep it here for Today with Dr. Kaye, and let's talk about it. Welcome back. I'm Dr. Kaye Wise Whitehead, and this is Today with Dr. Kaye. So we've spent some time talking about Columbus Day and why it should be called Indigenous Peoples Day. If you have a comment, give us a call at 410-319-8888. I also have Facebook Live up here. So if someone wants to jump in with the question, I got comments from Tyra. I have Barry and Mark up as well. If you have a comment on why this day should be changed, we want to get it changed to Indigenous Peoples Day. And there's some work that's being done, because there's the Italian American community who feels like this might be the first step towards people not really understanding their ethnic pride and why this is important to them. So in Los Angeles, they're actually going to take October 12th and designate that as Italian American Heritage Day. To me, it's a simple solution. Why do we continue to uplift a man who left in his wake disease, murder? He brutally terrorized hundreds of thousands of people, and we continue to lift it up. Columbus Day is only a day that we've chosen to use to celebrate who we are. He does not represent who we are. There are people that we should put up a statue to. There are people whose lives and whose contributions made it possible for us to be where we are now. There are people that you think should have a statue here in Baltimore City. Take down Christopher Columbus. Who should we put up instead? I have Ak on the line from Baltimore. Ak, welcome to Today with Dr. Kaye.
How you doing, sister?
How you doing, sir?
Yeah, a recommendation. What about one of George Washington's mammies?
Oh, and putting her up?
Yeah, I'm serious. He did have mammy, you know?
He did. So taking down, so the people who helped to build up and to support this infrastructure, let's start recognizing the nameless and faceless folks. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah. And another question, let me ask, all these years we've been taking care of those Confederate monuments like Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson. Who paid for that, the waxing, the whole 9 yards? You know?
That's probably coming out of our pocket. So not only are the statues up to remind us of a different time in history, that for many of us it represented a moment that marked the ending of American enslavement, we're probably paying for it as well. That's something we need to look into.
Well, if not, we should get reparation for that. We should get our money back. You have a good one, sister.
Thank you so much for calling in. We have Terry on from Baltimore. Terry, welcome to Today with Dr. Kaye. Is Terry with us? We'll get Terry on the line when they come up. So this idea of trying to figure out what we should do with these statues. I know we went through a lot, and we talked about it here on WEAA about Mayor Pugh's decision to remove the statues in the middle of the night. And she removed them because people like Dr. Lawrence Brown from Tent City and from Morgan State University put out something on Twitter saying either they take them down or we'll take them down, that we get empowered to make some changes ourselves. So then who decides what we're going to celebrate? I remember, and there's some people who might remember along with me, celebrating Columbus Day when I was a child. I remember the rhyme. What was it? In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. I mean, I was told for years that Columbus discovered America. And it was not until I was in college at Lincoln University, Pennsylvania, I went to an HBCU, where I was taught the truth, where my history professors said that anybody that comes to Lincoln will leave knowing the truth about their history, that you're not going to come through this school and walk out of here singing in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, believing that we have Columbus to thank for what's going on in this country. And it's interesting that that is still being taught. Even though schools were open in Baltimore City, they were closed in Baltimore County. There were a number of things closed today because of Columbus Day. Baltimore City has not made the right decision to do what they need to do. It is time for us to change the name from Columbus Day to Indigenous People Day. What do you think? If we take it down, what should we put up in its place? Indigenous People Day? Should we call it something else? Or just not have a holiday at all? I mean, it's not as if we need another holiday in this country celebrating someone or something if we're not looking at people who are marginalized, if we're not looking at people who have been brutalized in this country. Another thing I thought about this weekend is I was looking at what happened with Pence and the NFL game. I mean, when you think about statements that people are making about making changes in this country. So Pence, Sunday Night Football between the Indianapolis Colts and the San Francisco 49ers, it's been trending. And it's not because the Colts won by 3 points, which I think that's something to make it trend, but because Vice President Mike Pence not only disagreed with players who decided to kneel, but he showed his disagreement by walking out of the game. What I thought was interesting, and I said on Twitter, is that so he protested a protest by protesting and walking out. So I'm getting a little confused here. Because if you wanted to protest and you didn't want to agree with what they were doing, it's not a surprise. Why are you spending our money traveling down to this game, having them set up all the security they need to secure the place for you? Why are you costing us money? We should think about this and hold their feet to the fire. We're going to leave it here for just a moment. When we come back after the break, we're going to talk about Dove, racism, white soap, and where we go from here. I am Dr. Kaye Whitehead, and this is Today with Dr. Kaye. Welcome back. I am Dr. Kaye Whitehead, and this is Today with Dr. Kaye. We are talking about everything over here, or at least everything that matters today. We're talking about Columbus Day versus Indigenous People Day, and we've had a number of people to chime in. We want you to keep calling. We want to hear from you. One of the goals for Today with Dr. Kaye is to make the space available for people to talk. We tell stories that matter, and we want you to be a part of that conversation. Here, we're getting ready to talk more about Pence. So I asked you folks about Vice President Mike Pence spending our money and traveling down so he can protest the game. Why is anyone still surprised about the fact that there is a protest happening around what has happened to unarmed Black people? What is surprising to me, and I'd like to hear your comments, is when did the flag all of a sudden become the troops? And when did the troops all of a sudden only become white troops? Because there are Black people who've served in the armed forces as well. And we can talk about and think about all of the intense segregation that happened in the armed services. We can talk about and think about the large number of Black men who came home from the war and who were lynched while still wearing their uniforms. We can talk and we can think about what it means to fight for this country and fight for the notions of freedom and justice and equality abroad, and then come home and be denigrated and be marginalized and be told that your voice doesn't matter. We can talk and think about this. And then we can talk about what's happening when people take a knee. Because taking a knee is not about a song. Taking a knee is not about people whose lives were lost because they went to war on behalf of this country. Taking a knee is about a way of protesting what is happening to unarmed Black people and what's been happening since we've really been recognizing it through Black Lives Matter. I want to hear from you. 410-319-8888. We have Darren on the line. Darren, welcome to Today with Dr. Kaye.
Thank you, Dr. Kaye. And you are talking about a lot today. You're talking about statues. You're talking about patriotism. And, I think it all, to me, relates to the Constitution of the United States of America, which the children are not being taught in school, and the relationship. I think patriotism just is your relationship to the Constitution. Your understanding of what the Constitution means, because that's the law of the land, really, and and your relationship to that, and your relationship and whoever you are.
Right.
And I think we got to also always look that America is a contradiction. I mean, it was started by some guys that wanted some kind of freedom, but they were slave owners, and they weren't perfect people. So, I mean, I don't know. When you talk about statues, I mean, I think it's a slippery slope, like wanting to take down people's statues because of a freedom. It's freedom of speech issue. I think, like, if somebody's got a Confederate statue and they put it up with their own little private funds, they have the right to have it. But
I agree with you.
I think what progressive people should do is support their institutions and build statues and make ways that our children know the truth about colonialism and so forth. But I think I don't think we got to step on somebody else's message to put out the truth. And I think there are more progressive people. We just got to get working.
Thank you so much, Darren. So he is right that if we want to have changes, then we need to be willing to put our pocketbooks and our wallets where our mouths are. I mean, I'm not sure if I am prepared at this moment. I want to be totally transparent with my listeners. I'm not sure if I'm prepared at this moment to write the money for a statue to go up for Ella Baker, although I think one should go up. If I had the money, I mean, we'd have Ida B. Wells statues lined from Morgan State all the way down to the harbor. But that's not something I can afford to do. Instead, I can work in the areas where I can work. Are we doing the other hard work? It's not about taking down statues by themselves. Are we also teaching the truth behind these statues? Are we also talking about why this even matters? I want to bring Dr. Treva Lindsay into the phone call here. Dr. Treva Lindsay is from The Ohio State University, and we're going to turn our attention to talking about the Dove ad. I don't know if it's an honest mistake or a publicity stunt, but Dove Body Wash, and I love their commercials, by the way, they are under heat for a Facebook ad that shows a darker-skinned black woman taking off her dark brown shirt, and she becomes a white girl underneath with a light tan shirt on. Now, this was part of kind of a 3-part ad where the white girl takes off the shirt, and I believe she becomes an Hispanic girl underneath. But the makeup artist on this shoot took that one image of the black girl. It's kind of a four-picture piece here. It's a GIF where you have the black girl standing. She grabs the bottom of her shirt. She pulls it halfway off. And when she pulls it all the way off, it reveals, I think, a blonde white girl, actually. And so she's saying she put this out here because this is a subliminal message that dark skin, black skin, is not desired. That inside of every black woman, there's a desire to want to be white. Now, we know this is rooted in a lot of history. And we're going to get into that with Dr. Treva Lindsay, who's also the author of Colored No More. Dr. Lindsay, thank you for joining us. Dr. Treva, are you on the line with us?
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I am so happy that you're here, and we are excited because you're going to be back with us in a couple of weeks talking about your book, which is Colored No More,
Yes.
which is about black women in Washington, D.C.
Yes.
So this is kind of a teaser for my listeners to have a little bit of you now, because I know if anyone has an opinion about this, Dr. Lindsay, I know that you do. So let's just jump right into it. What is the message that this type of ad sends to young black girls?
It's a horrible message, Dr. Kaye. It's a message that is all too common when it comes to the beauty industry. And given this kind of recent wave of interest in black beauty, which should always be an interest considering it's a multi-billion-dollar industry in terms of what black women specifically spend on beauty products, it's interesting that we're still having conversations that we could have been having in the early 20th century about the marketing of products. That whiteness, lightness, fairness, fair skinness in terms of skin is still something seen as beautiful. Now, in 2017, the question becomes, what kind of company doesn't have someone on their staff who would have seen this and been like, no, absolutely not. This is what this signals. So if all of these people miss this, before this moment, there has to be someone on your staff who has the basic cultural competency to know this is not okay. But the issue with Dove is that this is not the first time that we've seen this. They had an issue in 2014 when they had a bottle of self-tanning lotion where it says, fair to normal, and then normal to dark.
Yes.
Right. And so this already positions dark skin as abnormal. And we know that when we talk about difference, unfortunately, often in these instances, we're talking about a hierarchy of difference, a valuing of certain things over another. So it's not just that there are multiple kinds of skin and that they're opening up self-tanning lotions for a range of skin tones.
Right.
It's saying that one is normal and that normal is based on whiteness.
Now, what's interesting, and one of our folks on Facebook Live, Jay Cameron, just kind of put out and reminded me of a racist ad that came out of Japan where a black man goes into the washing machine and he comes out white. It showed on Facebook. So Dove is on the under fire, but they're not the only ones doing this.
No. I mean, so many of our favorites would fit into this. Unfortunately, I mean, it shows us the global nature of white supremacy, that this is not, even in spaces like Japan, which we tend to think of it as a non-white space,
Yes.
right? They're predominantly people of color. Whiteness still has this way of being this almost imperializing force, this force that's so dominant in the lives of the way that the beauty industry is constructed. And because the United States has such a prominent role in the world, on the world stage of defining what beauty is, what's acceptable, what is attractive, what is appealing, it impacts so many other spaces where people of color are actually the dominant in terms of population, the dominant group in terms of population, but still see whiteness and fairness and certain features, certain hair textures, et cetera, as what the beauty standards should be.
Now, Treva, I'm going to get into something that is a little difficult, but I think here on the show today with Dr. Kaye, we like to tell it exactly as it is. Now, both you and I have natural hair, and for people who are not familiar with this, that we do not put products in our hair to straighten our hair, whatever that means, to make it more acceptable. But I know growing up, having hair that was natural, I remember being called nappy head, being called ugly, because my hair was considered to be too nappy in its natural state. So this idea of whiteness being this overwhelming force, I want to get into just a little bit, how is this playing out in our own communities, around light skin and dark skin, around who's allowed to come in? I mean, my mom used to tell me that little rhyme, what is it? If you're black, get back. If you're brown, stick around. If you're light, you're all right. Like my mom said, there was always this kind of challenge because she is a darker skinned woman and dealt with feeling undesirable all her life. So how do we have that conversation? And before you answer, for some of the folks on Facebook Live who cannot hear you, I want to tell them, go right to WEAA.org. We are live streaming the show, and you can hear Dr. Lindsay's remarks and her comments. Treva, so what do you think? How do we deal with that?
So it's a difficult conversation. It's an emotional one. It's a challenging one because some of this is about the ways we've internalized white supremacy, the ways we've internalized ideas about beauty. And we see pushback to this in, what we call the natural hair movement, people embracing this, more products that are geared towards women with kinky, nappy, textured hair, that you see even some of the mainstream brands doing this, and in addition to the creation of brands that celebrate this. But I still think we have, even within that, demarcations. There are certain curl patterns that are more acceptable than others. It's not necessarily tightly coiled, kinky, nappy hair that's being described as beautiful. It's a looser curl pattern that flows and moves in a certain kind of way. So we're still doing that work. And some of this is just being honest about the roots of this, honest about the ways that skin color and hair have always mattered in our communities, and that those divisions don't have to be divisions. There can be a way that we can talk about differences among us and the various beauties that blackness comes in. I think that would be one way to talk about this. But we know that there are better outcomes for people with lighter skin. I mean, this has been shown in a number of arenas. This is not something that we're just making up.
And we know it's historical.
About privilege.
Well, it's historical. Like if we go all the way back, and I know you do this research, as do I, going all the way back to the plantations, about the ways in which black people were separated by the color of their skin. And we know it ties in to miscegenation coming down from the plantation owner. Like there's, rape is involved in this, miscegenation is involved in this. Who is desirable to serve in the house? I mean, I've read so many research reports about the fact that people actually wanted to work in the field. You work in the field because you got time off. When you worked in the house, you were at the beck and call of the plantation owner day in and day out. without
Yes.
end, without stopping. So when we start thinking about that, I think that these are difficult conversations, but that we must have them if we want to get through this.
Absolutely. And I think that's such a wonderful point you brought up, Dr. Kaye, that talking about the plantation even in more complicated ways, it becomes really easy to go house Negro, field Negro. Field is more laborious, it's dark skin, right? We have all of these ideas about what that is. But in addition to this research, we learned some of the violence that's happening in the plantation about rape and sexual assault and how miscegenation is happening in this. And these interracial dynamics are most often through the course of violence that we get to see this. So thinking about, even though we can talk about light skin as privilege as it moves along throughout the 19th, 20th, and now into the 21st centuries, we also have to interrogate our ideas about how Blackness has played out in all of its diverse ways in relationship to white supremacy. And that is a hard conversation as well, because it's not as simple as we would like to make it. It's not as simple as house Negroes had it better, field Negroes had it worse, right? That's a very ahistorical way of looking at this, but we can look back and see, how does light skin function in relationship to whiteness? How does it function in relationship to Blackness and dark skin Blackness? And doing this along a continuum of experiences that are historically rooted.
I think what's interesting, and this is something that actually bothers me, Treva, because I dealt with the light-skin, dark-skin issue when I was growing up. My mom dealt with light-skin, dark-skin issue when she was growing up. But I kind of thought that in the advent of Black Lives Matter, we've come out of a history, for those of us who have a certain age. I remember Black Power. I remember the dashikis. I remember being told that I was happy to be nappy. I am surprised because my sons are dealing with the light-skin, dark-skin issue. Like, even though we don't teach this in the household, somehow or another they've picked up on this idea of lighter skin being more desirable. So how do we have this conversation with children, Treva?
Right. So part of this is just starting the work of affirming Black children from a very early age. The fact that one of the ways that we talk about Brown versus Board, we know that part of that case was having dolls, right, selected, and Black children still preferring white dolls and identifying them as smarter and more beautiful, and that you can do that experiment in the 2000s and still have Black children who see whiteness in relationship to this. So we're still talking about how we expose Black children in particular to a range of beauty, but also non-Black people to a range of what beauty is. And the question of beauty is always such a difficult one, because people are like, well, it's subjective, it's personal,
right.
It's not something that we can control. We absolutely can socialize people into thinking about beauty more broadly. We do it with so many other things, that you have to unlearn a lot of what we presume to be notions of beauty to learn about the expansive ways that beauty can show up in the world. And I think it's most important that we start in our Black communities with that kind of affirmation. And I see that work happening in lots of families and schools and community spaces where we're told very early on that you're beautiful. This hair texture is so amazing. The way we talk about dark skin, it's no more of this, she's pretty for a dark-skinned girl, right? That's not a compliment. It's a terrible statement to make to any young person, a person of any gender, and regarding their skin. That's absolutely absurd. You just want to say you're beautiful.
Right.
And that's it. And
put a period there, not a comma, right?
A period.
Put a period, no comma. Instead of saying, for a Black person, you're smart, comma, and then adding an other. Just like, let's stop with the commas and just say you are smart. You're smart for a Black person. You're beautiful for a dark skin. Like, just stop and put a period there. Let's just affirm our children with being beautiful and smart and brilliant because they are.
Exactly. And that is something that we can start that message with there. And then we need it reinforced on a number of levels. It needs to be present in our media, that they see people who look like them, that they hear people who sound like them, they engage people with similar experiences as they do. Media plays an important role in this. And that's why the Dove ad was so infuriating, because on one hand, you have this brand that has been all about beauty in all shapes and sizes and forms, and doing these kind of ads with size inclusivity and different looking people, different hair, different skin. And then you have these products, because the product at the end of the day is the brand.
Right.
And if the brand is telling you that you are not beautiful, that you are not desirable, that you are not attractive, or even worse, that you're unclean or dirty, right? And how much does this trace back onto ideas about blackness, stereotypes about blackness in the 19th and early 20th century, then we have to take issue with the brand. We have to take issue with the product. We have to take issue with the message that this company is sending out about blackness.
Well, I completely agree with you. Thank you so much, Dr. Lindsay, for joining us. I want to tell folks to go and pick up your book, Colored No More. She is going to be joining us on the show in the next couple of weeks to talk about it. And I'm excited to delve down into the book and talk about the impact of that book here in Baltimore City. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Stay with us. When we come back from this short break, let's continue to make our way through the news. And let's talk about sexism, about what's happening with medical marijuana dispensaries. And let's just talk about what is on your mind here at 410-319-8888. Stay with us. Welcome back to Today with Dr. Kaye. I'm Dr. Kaye Wise Whitehead, and we are going through some of the headlines for the national news. We have quite a few callers on the line. We want to get to those callers and open up the lines. But let's talk about Harvey Weinstein. Let's put that on the table, and folks can comment on that as well. But Harvey Weinstein is the co-founder of Miramax, and he's being sued for sexual harassment. Allegations have been taking place, all kind of reported misconduct. Once again, we seem to have a situation where a man in a position of power is using his position to put women in positions that they don't want to be in. And I did mean as a double entendre, using his position to put women into positions. So there are all kinds of reports that are coming out, and he's actually suing the New York Times for defamation of character on this report that was written about him. I think of what happened with Bill Cosby. I mean, we have that taking place. I think about Nate Parker, who directed the movie Birth of a Nation, the new one that just recently came out. I think that things that are being done in the dark and that have been done in the dark are coming to light, and that we have the right to know. I might not support a movie if I know that the director is a rapist. I don't want to go spend my money. I did not go see Birth of a Nation because of all of the information about the woman who accused Nate Parker of rape and everything that came out about that. I said, I'm not going to support that type of person. I may one day, years down the road, change my mind, but at this point, I say no. I don't have to see it. So even though my $10 won't make or break this movie, I think it's about making a moral stand. When you spend your money, listeners, are you making a moral decision? I mean, are you choosing where you spend your money? Every dime that comes out of our household, I like to think about, where am I putting it? Am I putting it back into my own community? Am I putting it into communities that are being pulled from my own? Am I supporting small businesses? I think that's something that we just have to be serious about. I think we need to be very clear about what we're doing with our money and why. And if the person who is behind the camera, if the company that's behind the movie, if the person that's starring on the television show, if that person has a questionable life that does not fall in line with what I believe, I shouldn't be forced, nor should I make the decision freely to support them. We have Clarence on the line. Clarence, welcome to Today with Dr. Kaye.
Thank you, Dr. Kaye. On the natural hairdo,
Yes, ma'am.
I think our women are the most beautiful women in the world.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, on to the other part, Kaepernick with the one knee.
Yes.
I'm a 68-year-old African-American man with 2 children, 1 male, 1 female. And I'm a Vietnam-era veteran. A lot of the people that are protesting have no clue, talking about white folks, about the flag. If you realize 4th of July holidays, what do? They take the flag and stick it in the ground. The flag's not supposed to touch the ground.
Mm.
The other issue is I'm upset with the NFL players. Donald Trump basically said that African-American men were SOBs.
Yes, he did.
I have not hung a flag this year. And I have a neighbor, I live in Pennsylvania, and it's 4 black families that live in my neighborhood. I was asked by a white person 2 months ago, why haven't you hung a flag? Is it in reference to the protest? I said, yes. And what I would like for all of our people to do, male and female, stop going to these football games. Stop spending your money places where you're not doing it. And since we spend our money and we don't look at where we spend our money, today they call that holiday. Well, indigenous people were here, and African Americans are mixed with those.
Clarence, thank you so much for calling, because I absolutely do agree. Being very clear about where you're spending your money. What are you spending into, and what are you supporting? The African American community spends over $1 billion a year on all kinds of products, from shoes to clothes to hair products. That is something that we can use as leverage by deciding who we're going to spend into. We can support Black businesses by just putting our money there. By instead of going to one restaurant, we go to one in our community. Instead of buying hair care products or body products from Dove, we support a small business person. We have Margot on the line. Margot, welcome to Today with Dr. Kaye.
Hi, Dr. Kaye. I was just driving and listening to about the color of our skin, and I'm so much like you. I came up with the dashikis. When James Brown put out Black is, let's say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud, I'm dark-skinned. And I've been natural now for about 10 years. And when I go to get my hair done or what I get done to it, everybody's always saying, oh, you got good hair, or you got nice hair. And I'm always correcting them. All hair is good. My hair is just a little different texture, but all hair is good. And I came up with white stick around and black stay back. I didn't have light-skinned friends growing up. I actually, as an adult, have said to people, you couldn't have been my friend when I was growing up.
Wow.
Because that's how deep it was.
Yeah.
That's how deep it was. But you know what? What God did? He gave me a light-skinned granddaughter and light-skinned grandson. So how can I dislike them? I said, God has a sense of humor.
He turned that whole thing around.
That was such a best conversation. I didn't know nobody went through it like I did.
Thank you so much, Margot, for calling. I mean, that's how things.
Have a great day.
Thank you so much. That's how things get turned around. We are trying. Thank you. We are trying to figure out, how do we work through this? One of the things that's come up in this conversation today is talking about light skin, dark skin. It is not a new discussion. In fact, it's a very old discussion, and it's one that I'm probably, along with many people, just sick and tired of. Why do we have this division in our own community? Why do we make this long-standing commitment to divide ourselves based upon the color of our skin? Why can't we figure out that these are the things that are used against us and not for us? That we can decide to chart out a new path. We can do something different. When we talk about changing the world, we have to realize that, changing the world is really a huge, hard thing to do. And when my sons tell me, Mommy, I'm going to grow up and change the world, I'm like, what would be better? Even though I want the world to be changed, and that just sounds like a huge and tall task, why don't you start by changing yourself? Because if you change yourself, and if everyone focus on that, imagine that the world will get changed if we all change. This is Today with Dr. Kaye, and we're kind of making our way through the national news. I'd like to hear from you at 410-319-8888. Earlier, I noted that the schools in Baltimore County were closed today for Columbus Day. A caller just called in and told me that that's not absolutely correct. There were some private schools that were closed. So I want to be clear and make sure that's cleared up, and folks didn't think I should have kept my kid home from school and sent them off to an empty building. It's okay. Some schools were closed. So thank you, callers, for keeping me straight on these things. When we come back after the break, let's talk about, how do you find a job? And even more importantly, how do you keep a job? I'm Dr. Kaye Wise Whitehead, and this is Today with Dr. Kaye here on WEAA 88.9 FM, the voice of the community. Stay with me for an update from MTA. Welcome back. I'm Dr. Kaye Wise Whitehead, and this is Today with Dr. Kaye, where we discuss everything from politics to prose. If it is important, if it is interesting, if it's happening in your community or around the country, and if it has your ear, that it has our attention. It's Monday, so it's time to give you the advice that you need. So call in now as we work our way through our President Advice column, 410-319-8888. We're talking about how to get a job, the difference between a job and career, how do you find and keep either your job or your career, and also the challenges here in Baltimore City about trying to find a distinction between the two. Joining me is Karen York. She is the first female African-American executive director of the Job Opportunities Task Force. First of all, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think it's absolutely wonderful. And I will tell you, there's a part of me that's just like, I can't believe it's 2017 and we still have the first.
I know.
Still have the first. But you know what, Karen? If we have to have the first, then I'm glad it's you.
Thank you.
And I'm so glad that you're here with us. Now, I want to say the Job Opportunities Task Force is an independent statewide nonprofit organization that promotes programs and policies to help low-wage workers advance to high-wage jobs. So the whole idea is helping to eliminate employment barriers and improve the conditions and outcomes of working families.
Yep.
So let me start, Karen. Can you just outline for us, because my over the break, my producer came in and she was telling me that there's a difference between a job and a career.
Sure.
What is the difference between the two?
Sure. So first of all, thank you for having me, and a congratulations extended to you as well, Doctor.
I made it through the second
welcome,
week.
Welcome.
The show was not canceled over the weekend.
Stank a leg. So the difference between a job and career, you have varying definitions, but at Job Opportunities Task Force, what we like to identify as the difference between a job and career is just starting with a career. With a career, there is some longevity attached to it. So with a career, you've identified a passion, something that has intrigued you, or something that interests you, whether you were studying it in school or whether you were working a job. And found that you have greater interest in this job. And so as a result of that greater interest or intrigue, you are trying to figure out how you can extend your professional longevity in this particular industry. And so what you're going to do is you're going to identify whatever credentialing you may need, what schooling you may need to take, what professional development courses or opportunities you may need to secure in order to protect and secure your longevity in that industry, so that not only are you staying in that industry for a long period of time, but you're also moving up in that industry, so that you're going from, your entry level to your mid-level to your senior level to hopefully at some point you're owning your own within that particular industry. And that is how you define a career. You are literally mapping out how you can make money off of something that you love to do, and how you can ensure that there's some longevity attached to it. A job is literally just what it is. It's you have found something that can pay the bills, and it could be a good, there are good jobs out there that have good wages. And sometimes there are some jobs that have some longevity to it. But many times you find that those jobs that have longevity to it, those are individuals who feel stuck. They have not been able to identify what the next step is. In their particular job, there's no opportunity for upward mobility. And they may not necessarily have the opportunities to secure, additional educational opportunities to be able to take on another, job opportunity, which may be connected to an actual career opportunity.
Well, let me ask you this, because I think it gets a little confusing, right? So you said a career is about longevity, about finding your passion. A job is just about paying the bills, right? That you cannot kind of clearly map out a plan for moving up because you're stuck. Do people reach a point in their career when it becomes a job? So you start off with all this passion.
Sure.
And I have met a number of teachers. I'm just using teachers as an example, callers, not just calling out teachers, who started teaching with a passion. It's something they really wanted to do. And they got into the field. They can clearly see paths for advancement, but along the way they felt stuck.
Absolutely.
So the career became a job, or they just need to work and push through that moment of feeling stuck? Like, what exactly is that?
I mean, that can absolutely happen, right? You change your mind whether, you decide to major in one thing, you have this passion to major in this. And then, as you start to matriculate through, your college courses, you realize, I don't really like this. So I actually like this over here. And that happens a lot of times with folks where they feel that they have found their career, their passion, and then once in it, they've realized that it's not for them, or what is required may not necessarily, be what they were ready to take on. So there are definitely opportunities and instances where individuals, have found their career, and then it ends up being a job because they've just lost interest, or there are a number of barriers that prevent them from being able to move forward. And so there's also, a delicate balance too, because a lot of times there are structural barriers that, may prevent you from moving up, and you may feel that it's just a job, but you're passionate about it. And it's just a matter of how do you knock down those barriers.
I think what's interesting when we start talking about career and about jobs, that there's this notion that there is a place of passion for everybody. But when you think about it and think about our society, would our society work as effectively as it does if we didn't have people to, and do not take this the wrong way, listeners, if we did not have people to pick up the trash, to make my coffee at Starbucks or 7-Eleven, to fix my car when it goes in the shop, to have my clothes dry clean, to clean up the laundromat if I want to go to the 24-hour laundromat. So I look and go, okay, you're working at, the chicken place, and I don't know if that's a job or a career, but in order for me to get chicken at 2 o'clock in the morning, then someone's got to work there. In order for me to get coffee from 7-Eleven in the middle of the night, someone's got to be there. And I know that what we're talking about is capitalism at work, but can a society really function? Everyone's just doing things they have passion, there's upward mobility. What about some things that are really just the jobs that we need to keep our society moving forward?
Right. So there's a lot with what you just said that could be unpacked, but I'm going to focus on 2 points. So, a lot of times you hear this argument of, the low wage jobs, or, the lowly jobs, and there's no passion in doing them. Those, for instance, which you indicated, the person who works at Starbucks or other places. While you do have some individuals who are unhappy in those lowly jobs, and even though those jobs are very, very necessary, you're absolutely right, those jobs are very, very necessary, and you do have individuals who have identified those jobs as their only opportunity to, pay the bill and or move up. And I'll talk more about that in my second point. But you do have a good number of individuals who they may be the, barista at Starbucks and actually has a true love and desire for making coffee, and will, talk about coffee sometimes way too much than you're interested in at 7 o'clock in the morning when you're just like, I literally just want that. But I mean, there's some passion. Even individuals who you find are your janitors at schools, there are individuals who you may see them and say, wow, you're working a lowly job, but they take pride in their job. They take pride in the fact that, they have to clean these floors, and you better not drop anything on their floor because they don't have time to be coming behind you to keep cleaning these floors. They take pride in the floors. They take pride in their coffee. And so you do have those positions where we may look at them as lowly, but, you have some individuals that they're like, you know what, I take dignity in these positions, and I'm proud to be the one to have to do them. But moving on to my second point, that just opens up a whole other can of worms about these, low-wage jobs, and how many of these low-wage jobs, we may not identify them as low-wage jobs, or there may not necessarily be this unhappiness or anxiety around having these low-wage jobs if they weren't low-wage jobs, and we actually paid a living wage, and we actually provided things like, sick leave and, maternity and paternity leave, and, allowed opportunities for professional development where you don't just stay a laborer, but there's actually an opportunity for you to grow within that company. So, that's just a whole other piece in terms of, this low-wage worker economy in and of itself.
Now, if you just joined us, I'm Dr. Kaye Whitehead, and this is Today with Dr. Kaye. And we're talking with Karen York about the difference between a job and a career. And now we want to move to kind of some practical applications around how to get a job that may, I'm looking at Karen, may become a career, or even how to move into your career. If you have questions, give us a call at 410-319-8888. I do want to say, Karen, just by point of clarification, I definitely don't see these as lowly jobs because I see them as part of what we need to keep our structure working. I tend to take issue with people who talk about, a lowly job or, a highly job or a blue collar, white collar, one's respected, one's not. That's the background I come from. Even though my daddy was a pastor and my mom, for a while, helped to open up Head Starts around the country, around the East Coast, I go back a generation, to my granddaddy laying down the railroad tracks. And even though that was considered to be a lowly job, where you're kind of at the bottom rung of society,
those wages were good.
The wages were good, but it was considered to be a lowly job because of the back-breaking work, right? So I remember that my granddaddy, after working so many years laying down railroad tracks, he would say, I'm laying down tracks to places I'm never going to go. And that he used to stand up tall in my eyes. And the older I got and the longer he worked, he began to bend over slowly. So yes, he made money and took care of his family, which became my family. The work he did was not respected.
Sure.
I think for this system to work, if everybody's a doctor, then nobody's a doctor, right? So someone's got to work on all ends of the spectrum. So I don't think of them as lowly jobs. I'm just saying, can we get to a place where these jobs, this is a different conversation, I know, but those jobs are just as respected as lawyers and doctors, that teachers, that's seen as a career of passion. Because for people to become lawyers and doctors and presidents, they came through some teacher's classroom. Like they're not being educated in the bubble. So now I want to go to the practical piece, Karen. Okay, so what are the best and practical ways to get a job in Baltimore City?
So to answer that, what I want to do is I want to provide 3 quick tips and then provide a bit of context for why I identified those tips. And these tips are specific to Baltimore City. So many of the tips, and they're just like your quick and dirty tips. I already articulated them earlier. You want to identify your passion. What is it that you're really interested in? What is it that you can see yourself waking in the morning, going to bed at night thinking about and having no problem thinking about and, throwing yourself completely into? The second is you want to identify whatever educational credentialing requirements are necessary to help you move up to every possible level within your particular passion or industry, in addition to any legal barriers that may present itself. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. And then position yourself for mobility. Okay. And what I mean by position yourself with mobility is identify both volunteer opportunities, after-hour opportunities, where you always want to be in the room with those folks who, will see that you're eager and hungry and yearning to, be completely acclimated in this particular industry. And they will then call on you and then be able to identify you for greater opportunities, in addition to you just being able to completely wrap yourself in as much information as possible, so that you are kind of self-educating yourself and become the expert in the room. And therefore, you then have to move up because you're the expert. The reason why, I'm just going back to my second point, I said identify those educational requirements and legal barriers, and this is specific to Baltimore City. I'm going to give a couple stats just to talk about why, even though Maryland is considered the wealthiest state in the union and we're the, one of the prosperous states, many are left behind, and most of it is in Baltimore City. You have large pockets of unemployment in Baltimore City. You have 65% of working adults that are unemployed. You have 20% of city adults over the age of 25 years old who lack a high school diploma, and nearly half of our city population have no formal education past high school. That's more than 200,000 city residents, a third of the city population, that are struggling to secure stable economic opportunities. And then you add in the fact that in Baltimore City, there is an unusual, inappropriate interaction with the criminal justice system that our city residents have dealt with for decades and unfortunately continue to deal with in many aspects. And that interaction results in something called a criminal record. And in Maryland, we have this thing called Maryland Judiciary Case Search, where this is a free online database. And we're unique because a lot of other states, if you want to access someone's criminal background, you got to get a court order, you got to pay some fee or something. No, in Maryland, all you need is internet access. And you can access someone's criminal background information. So employers, landlords, anyone, who has internet access can access this information. And so now criminal records checks, criminal background history checks they are no longer used for what they were supposed to be used for, charging and sentencing decisions. They've now become the sole determinant in hiring decisions. So when you hear numbers that's, like nationally 1 in 3 U.S. adults have some type of arrest or conviction record that pops up in a routine background check. And yes, I said arrest and conviction record because employers are not only looking at the fact that you were found guilty. You could have been arrested and your charges were dropped, but that's still on Maryland Judiciary Case Search. And if a hit comes up, that's a person that an employer no longer has to consider. And so when you hear these numbers where 1 in 3 have some type of, arrest or conviction record, when you hear numbers from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that say, that 1 in 3 black men, under the age of 23 can expect to experience incarceration at some point in their life. And when you hear 90% of employers, check background, use criminal background checks in hiring, and 60% would probably or definitely not hire an individual with a criminal record, it produces this interaction, this intersectionality of employment, incarceration, and dare I say race in Baltimore City produces what we have, which is large segments of our city's working population is effectively unemployable as a result of a criminal record. And so that is why, over the years and currently you see advocates and stakeholders, and now you're even seeing business leaders and even more policymakers from across the sides, Republicans and Democrats, that are urging for things like banning the box. So we've banned the box on job applications in Baltimore City. And, we did it to a certain extent at the state level. But did you know that the box exists on college applications? Right. The box is you have to check a box indicating you've been arrested or convicted of a crime. Education is directly correlated to income, but in a city where, we know that individuals are more likely to interact with the criminal justice system than they are with the educational system, then why does this barrier exist? Things like expungement, where we know even after you get that interview that criminal background check is going to be ran on case search.
Well, let me throw something else out here because I want to make sure we get to this question around people who are temporarily experiencing homelessness. Now, I went through the training, talking about the ways in which we even think about people who are temporarily experiencing homelessness rather than just calling them the homeless, right? Like thinking about the ways in which we talk about that. So how do we help people that are temporarily experiencing homelessness? They don't have an application they don't have an address to put down the application. They may not have a place to take a bath, to get cleaned up for the interview. They may not have clothes to change into. How do we help that population? That's a large population here in Baltimore City.
That's a very large population, and I'm actually very happy that you brought that up. And there's 2 points that I want to make about that. The first one is, look, we're the Job Opportunities Task Force. Our focus is jobs. But of late, we've become more and more interested in having to be pulled more and more into housing issues. Why? On a job application, what's that second question? Your address. Right. They are going to need to know, where am I sending your mail? Also, if you are a mom with children or anyone, if you are at work and you don't know where you laying your head at night, you're not going to be a productive employee. How's that going to work? No. It's not going to work. So housing has to be a key component of any workforce model that any city, state, or business coalition or whoever is about, because it's a chronic issue in the city, and it's just as chronic as our unemployment issue because it's side by side. It totally is intersectional. But it also leads me to my second point. When we talk about homelessness in our city, or the homeless, or however you want to refer to them, I think it's very hard to not think about another term called the criminalization of poverty. Right. And what that is you're finding a number of individuals that are swept up in our criminal justice system simply because they lack stable housing, Dr. I mean, it is these are individuals who are suffering with mental health challenges. They have nowhere to live. I can't tell you how many women have indecent exposure charges on their record because they were changing their clothes on a park bench. Yes. I mean, just simple things like that. And now they have a record where if an employer sees that you have indecent exposure, they're not going to think, if they see that, they're not going to call you in an interview and ask, was it because you were changing your clothes on a park bench? No, they're going to think that you were probably improperly, showing yourself to a minor or something. So, it's this stigma of the criminal record and the stigma of poverty that completely just complicates things and makes it really, really difficult for our city residents to survive.
Well, I want to go to Travis, who's on the line. Travis, welcome to The Day with Dr. Kaye.
Yes, can you hear me, Dr. Kaye?
I can hear you very well. Thank you.
Yes, I'm an educator and a law student, and I'm enjoying the conversation. God blessed me 2.5 years ago to start a school, and He has helped me to be able to help 80 young men and women get their high school diploma. Wow. Currently have 70 in the program now. And the joy to see a young man or woman get their high school diploma, especially single women, single moms, and not single women, but single moms, and young men get their high school diploma and see the joy that they have, because it enables them to take their transcripts to a school
right.
and get some higher education. It's just a blessing.
Oh,
and I think that we have to also deal with the piece of the law piece, where young men, women are going through the revolving door because of the
right.
fact that once they get something on their record, it sticks with them. And then they are unable to get a job. I've seen it many times. They're unable to get a job. They're unable to better themselves. So what do? They go back on the street, get a marijuana charge, go back to jail, come out, get a marijuana charge. And it's just sad. I mean, we really have to focus on the expungement, and we really have to focus on these felonies.
Oh, thank you so much, Travis. Before I have you answer that, Karen, because we're almost out of time, I want to have Kadria answer, give her question, and then we can answer them together. Kadria, welcome to Today with Dr. Kaye.
Thanks a lot. I was talking to someone, and I told them I had worked for a long time for the state of Illinois. They fired me, they blackballed me, and it's like 11, 12 years. You can get off 2 or 3 years, but 11 years you cannot use these people for reference. The person I told to say develop other relationships, definitely, but they want work experience. What have you been doing for that? And next way you stay on these jobs, you shut your mouth. You ignore all the little insults and the little nasties they do to the black people around you. Don't say nothing to the black people there, because they're going to help cut your throat with the white people. And that's how you keep it. You be a patsy. In other words, very much like Obama had to do to stay in the White House. And I hate to say it, but it's just the truth.
Thank you so much, Kadria. I think to just kind of pull together Kadria and Travis's comment, because I definitely hear Kadria's concern. So to just kind of pull that together, she was on a job, she got fired, but that job is 11 years old. So how do you use that as a reference? And then Travis talked about dealing with expungement, being within the cycle where you get out, you get arrested, you get out, you get arrested, you just keep going back. How do you disrupt that cycle? And then also, how do you figure out what to use when you want to go forward for job references?
Sure. So very quickly, Travis, just you're absolutely right in terms of needing expungement to restrict public access or get rid of that information that is dated and no longer relevant to an employer. Employers should be judging you on your merits and your qualifications, not what happened to you years ago, particularly if it has no relation to the job at hand. But I also want to just talk about occupational licensing too. You mentioned particularly women. A lot of times we focus on men that are going in and out of our systems. We have more and more women that are matriculating in and out of our systems. And, these are women who are, going back, who are now back into our society and are now trying to, lead their families and take care of their children. And if we know that jobs now require some type of occupational professional license, these are women that now can't get their nursing license renewed because they have some charge on their record that's preventing them from moving forward. So you're spot on in terms of the expungement. But the last caller, what I picked up on is something that many residents struggle with, many workers struggle with, and it's this lack of work experience and how that shows up on your resume. And how do you explain that? And how do employers use that against you? And there's really no easy way to answer it, because if they see gaps in your employment history, they're going to want to know why there were gaps, whether it was incarceration or whatever. And so it's just a matter of figuring out the best way to answer that question and to frame it so that you end up being still the attractive candidate to the employer. But gaps and a lack of work history, it's going to be a problem regardless. It's just a matter of how you frame it.
Well, thank you so much, Karen York. She is the first female African-American executive director of the Job Opportunities Task Force, JOTF, right here in Baltimore City.
Right here in Baltimore.
So as you're figuring out your next steps for looking for a job, getting passionate about your career, reach out to JOTF. I'm sure that they can help you. Now, stay with us after the break, because we're going to honor our next trendsetter. We are moving forward here on Today with Dr. Kaye. Stay with me. Welcome back to Today with Dr. Kaye. I'm Dr. Kaye Wise Whitehead, and we're here talking about our trendsetters. We like to highlight local folk here in Baltimore City who have gone above and beyond, who are keeping it very real, which is what my dad used to say, so I feel very dated at this moment, keeping it real, but that they have found a way to transform this city from the inside out. They are very loyal. We had Jill P. Carter on, and this week, of course, the only person that can follow up Jill P. Carter is the one and only Dee Watkins. Thank you for joining us, Dee. Kaye.
Thank you. Jill's Picard is a tough act to follow.
Jill Picard is a tough act to follow.
Very great person. Very nice person.
And we have you. He snuck up in the studio with you because I cannot fail to just mention that Kondwani Fidel is in the studio. He is passing over the mic to D. Watkins today. He was just on here on Friday, so I'm glad he's in the house as well. D. Watkins is editor-at-large for Salon. His work has been published in the New York Times, Guardian, Rolling Stone, and other publications. He holds a master's in education from Hopkins University and an MFA in creative writing from the University of Baltimore. He's a college professor at the University of Baltimore. He's founder of the Be More Writers Project. He has been the recipient of a number of awards, including the Ford's Men of Courage Award, a BME Fellowship. He is from and he currently lives in East Baltimore. He is the author of A Cook-Up, a crack rock memoir, and the B-side, Living and Dying While Black in America. D, thank you for taking time out to join us here.
No, thank you for having me. I always like to catch up.
Yeah, catch up.
We always move around so much. We don't get a chance to really ever talk about stuff.
Yeah, and this time, which is interesting because I've been with D here on WEAA before, and typically we're asking him about his insight on what's happening in Baltimore City. We're asking him what we can do to help young men turn their lives around. We're in the Trendsetters. We want to talk about you. And I know people have followed you with your work. And so I just want to ask you, when did you first know that you wanted to be a professor? And how did you transform yourself from being a drug dealer to being a college professor? Can you talk about that journey a bit?
Yeah, so for me, I was never supposed to be in the street. I was supposed to be like one of the first people who come from where I come from to East Baltimore, and who come from the family that I come from to actually be a person to go to college. It was set up for me, and my brother put me in a position to be able to focus on school and not worry about money and stuff like that. And after I lost him, it kind of changed the trajectory a little bit. But as far as college, when I went back to school, I had a couple of amazing professors who they made learning fun. They were excited got me excited about ideas. And I asked a lot of questions, but I think I observed even more. So I would just look at them and I would say, okay, this person works from February to this month, and then they work from September to they take a lot of days off, and then if they don't want to come to work, they just don't. Seems like a lot of freedom, but I didn't know how much work I had to do until I actually got the gig. But for me, I wear a lot of hats right now. So I did the podcast, and I'm still on tour from both books, and I'm still teaching, and I'm working on a television show now, and then I'm working in New York a lot, so I'm back and forth like every week. So I'm doing a lot of stuff now, but all of these things, like teaching is still like my number one. Like I love and I don't even have to teach composition classes. I teach in a graduate program at University of Baltimore, so it's like creative writing, memoir, platform, personal essay, stuff like that. But I asked for composition classes because I just like the opportunity to meet a young person who doesn't really love words and language, or they don't really think about it, and I like to help them get excited about telling their stories and get excited about reading and get excited just about the power of critical thinking. So for me, I saw some great professors, and then I said, concept of theory. I was like, I can do this. I want to do that. And I just started that long journey into being able to make that happen.
Now, what's interesting is we often talk about this notion of being a success story. I mean, you talk about how you were supposed to be the first one coming from where you came from. They put you in a position to be able to move forward. But have you come across in your work, going back in East Baltimore where you live, young people who have said, I want to be like you, but they can't seem to be able to write themselves out of that situation or even move themselves out of that situation?
Yeah, I'm not even successful. Like, I've accomplished a lot of things, but like success for me is like everybody around you, and everybody where we come from, and the people who we have a chance to work with directly, and the people who we mentor, they all have to have an easier pathway to achieving what they want to achieve. That's success to me. That's why I live in Baltimore. That's why I work so hard. That's why I try my best to share my platform, my skill set, my opportunities, the food off my plate to anybody I'm around or anybody that I work with, because it's like, we gotta lift as we climb. Like, it's so important to lift as we climb. I didn't have a lot of opportunities to be able to work with a lot of different artists when I was trying to get started, and I knew how difficult that was. I saw people feast on big meals while I starved, and it didn't really feel good. So I always try to be a person to help as many other up and coming writers and artists as I can. And it's not running for everybody. Some people are going to be electricians and they can have beautiful lives. Some people are going to, be school teachers, and all of these different things we can achieve. These things can happen. So it's not always writing, but whoever I'm around and whoever I'm working with, I try my best to make sure that I'm doing everything in my power to help them and hoping that they would do the same for somebody else. And that's just how we keep it going. I know that if I get stuck on a problem or if I'm struggling with an idea, I can call Kondwani up. You know what I mean? And he can come through and say, yo, this is, maybe you should word it like this. And he can, and I can do the same for him. And then we can use whatever resources we have to help another person and try to just keep it going. Because there's some great storytellers in the city, and a lot of them don't have platform, but I think we're working really hard to change that.
Which I think is really interesting, because part of what I see when I look at your work is that you make the difficult and the impossible imaginable. Like, you make it real, that you're saying in the work you do that this is kind of one outline that's been created by the media, but there's something behind that they can become, as you said, school teachers, electricians, that they can dream themselves out of this situation. So when young boys and girls come to you and they are caught in that trap where they feel like there's no out, and you can tell that their life is not heading in the right direction, and we can talk about what right versus wrong means, but what are some practical tips that you give them for how they can kind of move themselves in the opposite direction?
For me, it's always like, we're doing something extremely dangerous. We're telling kids and we're telling our young people that they can be whatever they want to be, and they say, why can I be whatever I want to be? And they say, simply because you're my child. Because you're my child, because you're my nephew, you're my niece, the world is yours. And which is great. We should be motivating our kids. We should be motivating our kids to be, we should be telling them to aim high. We should be telling them to follow their dreams and to figure out what their passion is and full court press towards making that happen. We should be saying that, but we should be telling them that if you don't read, if you don't learn how to critically think, if you don't learn how to really, really, really strategize and plan and map these things out, then it's just not going to happen for you. So anybody who when I come across these people, for myself, that planning phase is important. Okay, you want to write a book? That's cute. Everybody wants to write a book, but where's the proposal? Where's the plan? Where's the outline? What are you trying to say? What are the points? Okay, yeah, you had a rough life. Guess what? So many people have rough lives, but are you going to be able to articulate it in a way that's engaging, in a way that's inspiring, in a way that will get people interested in your story? If you're not willing to take the time to learn how to do that, then you really don't want it. So, nice guy, but I give tough love too. I'm working now to try to adjust my language because I'm too hard. I'm too hard sometimes. Like I had to realize that one of the kids I mentor, he got his camera took, and I tried to get the camera back in an angry, aggressive type of way. And this is not me as like a street guy. This is me, the professor, running around looking for this camera. And what he took from that is that to be successful, you just got to be hyper masculine. And I'm like, no, that's not how you get to be successful. How you get to be successful is to care for people and learn how to care for people and learn how to accept some of that care too. So I'm still learning. I'm still learning too. But.
Now, if you just joined us, I'm Dr. Kaye Whitehead, and I'm here on Today with Dr. Kaye with D. Watkins, and we're talking about his life and some of the choices he's made, as well as how he encourages young people to see themselves differently, to imagine themselves doing something else with their lives. You said something earlier which actually kind of struck me. You said this notion of telling your kids that they can be whatever they want simply because you're my kid. Like, just simply because you're mine means the world is yours. And that really struck me because I tell my sons that all the time. Like, you can be anything you want simply because you're my kid. Because
you Dr. Kaye Whitehead though. So your kids they're reading books, they're getting inspired.
Say,
they got a cool mom, they got a cool mom.
But that idea of failing up. So this notion that even if they begin to fall, there's a safety net there, right? Like the point you just made. I mean, how far will my kids really fall before I reach out and catch them? Right? Okay, they're not doing well in school. I'm not just going to sit back. You got to see, how do we make it a beat? We need a tutor. That idea of using these middle-class resources to keep your child from falling too far. What do you say to parents who don't have that? They're like, I want my child to be successful. I just don't have a safety net in place to financially catch them. What are some other strategies they can do to make sure their child doesn't veer too far off?
We have to be very, very clear in defining what success is. Yeah. What is it? Like, if success to you is a bucket of chicken on Friday and a case of beer, who am I to say? Right. Who am I to say that's not? If that makes you happy, smile. That might not be success for me. So one, we have to clearly define what success is. Two, we have to acknowledge our own shortcomings, and we have to be open with our kids. Like some people will say things like, they'll tell their kids, "I'm not successful because I didn't get to follow my dream because I had to stop and raise you." Okay. But they won't say I didn't follow my dream because I'm lazy or I'm scared or I thought that people were going to laugh at me because I'm a loser. You know what I mean? They don't say that, and I'm not saying that people don't follow their dreams are losers. I'm just saying that. That sounds bad. I'm saying that you should be able to tell your kid, I want to do this, I wanted to do that, but I couldn't. And you shouldn't sell yourself short. So we have to be clear at defining what success is and teaching our kids to create their own definitions of success. Right. Don't let Future or Beyonce or whoever tell you what success is. That's success for them. Your definition might be something different. And then two, we have to push the power of critical thinking. Our kids aren't learning how to think critically. They're not communicating. They're not reading. They're not even able to conceptualize anything outside of their own social context. So they're just getting everything from their neighborhood and their house, and they're just absorbing it. And then when you're a kid like me, stepping out of East Baltimore, so that's down the hill, that's Robinson and Jefferson, that's Latrobe, that's Somerset, that's Lafayette Housing Project, coming up from all these different worlds that I've been through and ran through as a kid, and then walking into an all-white space, and what are these people, why is everybody wearing boat shoes, and how come every time I say hi to somebody, they just do that little half a smile back? Like, what is that? Like, what's wrong? Why does everybody in the band but me? Like, what is wrong? Like, what's happening? So we have to be able to, but if I knew how to, think, then I would understand that this is I can fit in, I can figure out my space in this world, not fit in, but figure out my space in this world, utilize the gems and the tools I can pick up from them and advance myself to a higher level. I didn't know that back then, but I know that now. I can go anywhere. I can go to a Klan meeting and shine, and I can get what I need from them, and then I can leave and I could make a little plan to pick them apart if I wanted to, because I used what I had to take what I needed to get.
If you just joined us, this is Today with Dr. Kaye. We're talking to Dee Watkins here, and we invite you to give us a call at 410-319-8888. Because now I want to talk about your writing process. Part of what I'd like to think about are the ways in which you sit down and do your work in front of the page. I think for a lot of people who say they want to be writers, and we know that everybody who says they want to be writers doesn't mean they're going to sit down and do the hard work. The hardest part about saying you want to be a writer is actually doing the work and writing. But what is your writing process like? If you could talk a bit about that and talk about that in relations to the cook-up and to the B-side. Did you approach those projects differently? Is it all part of stuff that you already had? Like, what was that like?
It used to start with like a realization for me. Like, I used to realize something, like these big ideas that used to like knock me down when I was walking down the street, and I would get this big idea and fall on the ground. Not really, but I would get a big idea, and then I would like do like a summary on my phone and then go home and write it. But now, since I write so much, that process has changed. Like, if you give me if you say anything, like if you give me a statement like, Mike Pence should kneel for the national anthem, right? If somebody said that to me, I can write like, I'm trained now to write like 600 to 1,500 words on that on site. Like, wow. I could just go because I write so much now. Like, I put out like anywhere from like 3 to like 7, 8 articles a week now. So like anything that you say to me, it'll just stick. And then I can bop it out. But it wasn't always like that at first. I used to do outlines, but now I outline in my head. I used to need like everything that I wrote about in the B-side was like some big idea I had. Like, I learned, I knew that I never stood up for the anthem as a kid because like all the more conscious kids used to be like, yo, don't stand up for that. But when I found out that the anthem had those extra stanzas and those lines against against that no hireling or slave should be free from the gloom of the grave. When I learned that, then I knew that we were doing something that was connected to something deeper that was bigger than us, and that was a big idea for me. So that's an essay. When I was sitting outside with my friends and I saw them trying to talk, get this woman's phone number, and I saw how scared she looked when she was walking down the street. When I looked into her eyes, I felt compelled to write something about it because that was a big idea to me. But now I just, I sometimes I get big ideas, like how I feel like with the trauma that's going on in this country, as a black person coming up in the inner city, you see a certain amount of killings and you used to dealing with a certain amount of death. But now with all of the rise of these mass shootings, you got like white people getting killed at these concerts and it's like, well, how are they responding to that if that's not a part of their world, if that's not something that they ever saw before? And can we utilize this mass trauma to be able to all push together against like tougher gun laws or something that's going to keep more people safe, which is probably won't happen. But just the idea of just like thinking about how mass trauma or the trauma and the way it's coming in is like an American tradition now. So that was like I just thought about that a lot, and But I just write. I just write. And then when I don't know what I want to write about, I just write anyway. So I just sit down.
So you show up at the page every day.
I show up at the page every day. So sometimes I might sit down and write it. I might write a love story. Sometimes I sit down, I might write a story about a guy moving into a new town. Sometimes I sit down and I might write a story about like silly stuff. Like I write silly stuff sometimes too. I write comedy now too.
I didn't know that.
So what are you doing with that?
Yeah, that's new. So tell me about your writing comedy.
Breaking news.
Breaking news. D. Watkins is writing comedy. Now let me ask you this, because that's a little bit different from the Cook Up. It's definitely different from the B-side.
Not no comedy.
There's no comedy at all in the Cook Up at all. So how did you transition? It's just that because you're putting out 7 to 8 articles, you just are a writer at the heart and soul of who you are. And if that is comedy, if it's drama, it's just really about the process of knowing how to write well. Or is it something different?
I think I found something that I love to do, and I just dived all the way into it because I feel like throughout my life, I had a pretty solid work ethic, but I never knew what my passion was. Like for me, The Coldest Winter Ever was really like the first book that really locked me in. Like I read some books.
Right.
I read some books before that mean a lot to me, but that book was like, I just didn't know you can write a book like that. It just blew my mind. So after I read that, I started reading more. And then I started reading a lot of contemporary articles. And then I had this another realization where it was like, yo, there's a lot of people telling stories about black people, but they don't even know any black people. This is crazy. Like I would read even some of the articles I would read for some of the local newspapers. And I'm talking like back in like 2000. Like this is before I was a writer, so this is like 2009, 2010 for me. I wasn't writing, and I would read articles, and I would be like, "Yo, people don't even talk like this. You didn't get out your car to even have a real conversation with somebody. How are you authorized to do this?" And after like 2 years of that, I was like 2012. I was like, you know what? Let me go and throw my hat in the ring. Let me throw my hat in the ring and give it a shot. And I didn't take it lightly. I went to an MFA program, and I just started trying my best to read as much as I could and learn the craft as much as I could.
Now, you mentioned The Coldest Winter Ever, because one of the questions that just came across Twitter, people would like to know, what are you reading now? I mean, that was a book that for you kind of made this moment where you transitioned. But what are you reading now? Like, is it that you're doing so much writing and not doing that much reading anymore?
Yeah, I'm editor-at-large for Salon, so I'm reading a lot of work by my colleagues. So I'm coming across like essays from my colleagues every day. And for pleasure, I've been reading this book for a while now, but I'm finishing it. It's called Stamp from the Beginning. By Ibrahim. Yeah, he won the award. Mm-hmm.
So
he's amazing writer. He's been a great friend. He's an amazing writer. I met him. We were doing a panel. I met him on a panel. We did a panel together like 3 years ago, and we've been cool like ever since. So
I was just with him at ASALH, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History.
Amazing.
Coming in early to do a panel.
So I'm still learning from him. Finishing Dr. Stacey Patton's book.
Yep.
Reading Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson. So I never got a chance to read that book. But that's
you're reading all the heavies, right?
Yeah, I'm reading.
You're on everything from dealing with history of enslavement, which is Ibrahim's book. Stacey Patton's book deals with whipping black children, spanking in the history of that.
Yeah, I
Just Mercy.
I got a couple of those beatings.
Don't tell Stacey that.
Well, I'm not. But I'm reading a lot of heavy stuff because I'm writing a book right now. It's due next month. Yeah, I just signed a book deal with Simon Schuster a couple months ago. I don't know you saw my cane. I was in the hospital. So
I remember. But you put it out on Twitter that you were recovering. I think you had surgery on your legs.
Yeah.
I saw it on Twitter.
Yeah. So, but I signed a book deal with Simon & Schuster like a couple of months ago, and they gave me this weird due date, like November the 1st. So
okay, so can you tell us about the book?
Yeah, it's basically about.
And this is breaking news, I want to say.
Yeah. It's basically, the book is about representation, and it's kind of about what I talked about as far as when I first got into writing. There's a lot of people who are speaking for black people, and this is like the white and black people included, but they don't know any black people. So it's like you speaking for all of these people, but then in your own life, and this is just stuff I observed with my time on the road, my time in falling into these different activist circles, my time in learning that the business of activism, how it's so hot to be woke and to be like, I'm woke, but like
performative woke,
but you see somebody like a working class black person and you look down on them. Or you see a black person that's like your limo driver and he couldn't get through the traffic to get there 5 minutes early and you look down on him. Like I've seen people say some disgusting, egregious things to other black people, but I'm like, Dag, you the voice. I'm like, Dag, you the voice of the people. Like, you the voice of the people. So how you really talking to the people like that? And I feel like that disconnect between these classes, so you representing a large segment of us, and I say us because when I say I live in East Baltimore, I live in East Baltimore. I'm in East Baltimore. Like I live in East Baltimore, meaning that I don't live like and like I make it to the nice restaurants and I make it to the cocktail parties, but I make it to the block parties and the cookouts too. So I you like get you a man that can do both. So these people who get a chance to speak for people like where I come from, like where Kandani come from, they don't have any relationships with the people, like, okay, for instance, when Freddie Gray was alive, was you going to get him? Was you going to write a letter of recommendation? Was you going to let him work on your job? Was you going to try to help him out, or was you going to cross the street when you saw him?
Because that's the
but
truth
when he
of the
dies,
matter. Right.
Everybody can be like, stay woke, justice for Freddie. But but right. I'm with the people. But it's like, okay, and I'm not turning the argument inward because there's also sections on how like the white savior complex stuff doesn't work either. But it's about representation.
Yeah.
And I forgot the woman's name, but I'm going to mention her in the book. But she said a tweet that really just gave me the idea that was like one of the best tweets I ever read. It said, we don't need you to be a voice for the voiceless. Pass the mic.
Yeah.
Flat out.
Pass the mic. I like that. But it's this notion, we've been talking a lot about performative wokeness. What does it mean to perform acts of wokeness in spaces where people are marginalized? Something happens, you put on your vest, you show up, and you become the anointed voice of the people, even though you don't live in that community, even though the people did not ask
even if you don't live there, who you know? If you don't know, you don't know anybody.
You're not connected. You come in and you want to be mayor, but you have no idea what's happening on the ground. That's what performative wokeness looks like when it's played out in real life, when the media chooses the leaders.
So another thing that stuck out to me is like one day I was sharing a box of wings with my friend, and this kid comes up to me and he was like, and this is one of my friends that really make a difference. Like he really makes a difference, but he's like, he does like, you know how people work with like the PRP work, they work with like kids and all that. And it might be a kid in the system. He might pick the kid up, make sure he going to school and all that stuff. So he really he go above and beyond. So he really making a difference. And somebody came up to us talking about Black Lives Matter, and my homeboy that really make a difference, he don't even know what Black Lives Matter is. He never heard of it.
Because he's doing the work. He's doing the work.
And then it made me think like, and this is not even no knock on Black Lives Matter, but it made me think like, Dag, if you're not on the internet like that, you're not even connected to this. And then I thought about all of the people who don't have Wi-Fi or cell phones, so they can't connect to it. But these are huge segments of marginalized people that who make it to the media almost every day, but they don't even get a chance to speak for themselves. And they can all speak for themselves, and they all know that their financial status or their pedigree, they not second, 8th generation Morehouse or whatever. So it's like they don't really get a chance to ever really speak for themselves. Somebody always get a chance to speak for them. And a lot of times they don't even know what they talk. Like you can't ask Van Jones what I need. You know what I'm saying? And I don't even got nothing to get. I don't even know him. But the fact that I don't even know him is you can't tell me what, you taking pictures with Trump and them sons. Like, you can't speak for me. You know, that's the fact that you even do that makes you're not qualified. So why are they running to you?
Now I'm gonna have to stop you there, and it's hard to stop D. Watkins because I hear the passion in your voice. You're working on this new book called Representing, and it's about passing the mic. not giving voice to the voiceless, letting them speak for themselves. It's due November 1st. Yeah, so you have work to do. So we look to have you back once you get finished. Writer, author, professor, and editor-at-large for The Salon, D. Watkins, we celebrate you as our trendsetter, and we appreciate your time and your effort here. Now, stay tuned once we wrap up here for an update from the MTA. Thank you for joining us and for sharing your drive time with me. I'm Dr. Kaye Whitehead, and Today with Dr. Kaye is a production of WEAA. The show is produced by host Dr. Carsonia Whitehead and producer Iyore Odighizuwa. Our board operators are Andre Melton and Isaiah George. Our interns are Tamar Giles, Anissa Morales, and Petra Dorman. Stay tuned for Varaji Muhammad with For the Culture. I'm Dr. Kaye Whitehead. Join us tomorrow for more conversation about stuff that matters right here on your source for cool jazz and more. WEAA 88.9 FM, the voice of the community.